Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Rook, as well as the latest episode of Nosferatu. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of The Rook, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Nosferatu. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of The Rook. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, there's the whole thing between Linda and Conrad. I was actually kind of surprised that whole Miffany situation didn't stay between Conrad and the Home Secretary. Like, the fact that she confronted Linda about that, I was like, I guess it makes sense. But then she went to but Linda was like, okay, there's only one person this could have come from, and that was Conrad. I'm assuming, because she probably figured out that, like, he found out something and he decided not to tell me. It makes me wonder on some level, she probably always knew about the relationship, but it's like, hey, it's not my business, they can do whatever they want to. But then he kind of screwed her over by going to the Home Secretary about Miffany rather than coming to her. And for him, it's like, oh, it's a delicate situation. She's like, no, I see that too, and being like, thank you for basically, I think, she was kind of getting like cheeky with him, basically being like, thank you for basically showing your true colors, essentially, and letting me know I can't 100% trust you. And so she kind of goes behind his back and basically makes it so like, oh, you basically have to announce your relationship. I mean, obviously you're having an affair with a married woman, so there's that whole complicated thing. Conrad's like, oh, asking who filed the complaint, or rather filed that information, and it's like, well, of course it's Linda. I think most likely to get back at him about the whole Miffany thing. It's like, okay, I was going to be hush-hush about your relationship because I didn't care, but then your relationship kind of interfered with what I was trying to do. At the same time, like everything that's happening with Miffany, more vultures are coming after her. Luckily, the Gestalt were there to help, which we kind of dive into their whole situation a little bit more. We see them as little kids and just kind of seeing them put through trials, because obviously Miffany ends up coming across basically some conspiracy theories, like forums about like the Shikei and what they do and EVAs and all that stuff. So, it is kind of neat to see, because like the thing is, and what's so interesting about everything is no one's in the know. Even when the Gestalt, they're like, okay, obviously Linda sent them there to kind of keep an eye on Miffany, but also at the same time it's like no one knows about the memory loss. Because I made a note of that too when Linda was breaking things down about like, well, I wanted to basically give you, I didn't tell you Home Secretary because I wanted to give you plausible deniability, but also at the same time it was just like, it's like, oh, I looked at it as a situation, it's just like, oh, she's coming into her own. It's like, Home Secretary was like, well, I wish it was like a less public situation where we got to see her blossom. But it's like, it's like, yeah, you obviously left out the whole her not having memory thing. That's still something only Linda directly knows. We'll get back to who else knows amongst everyone, but the Gestalt and Conrad don't know. Once again, the Home Secretary doesn't know. There's a whole situation of Miffany checking up on the Gestalt, in particular Eliza, because Eliza got shot to make sure that she got away and everything. I mean, luckily it was just a sedative, but then like they start making out, which that's something I was wondering about too. Like, the whole Gestalt thing, it's very interesting when you actually break it down, because it's like, well, that's what I was wondering. I mean, I don't think it's just specifically tied to Eliza. I mean, because that's kind of the sad thing about it. They're not just one person, yet they are one person. They're one consciousness, but they're four separate people. But it seems like they were kind of broken down, so they get rid of that barrier of separation of being four different people while just technically being one. So that's the whole thing. I'm like, yeah, if you're in a relationship with one, you're technically in a relationship with four different people, but at the same time, you're only in a relationship with one person because they're all of one consciousness. So there's technicalities to the whole situation. But that's what I was kind of wondering. I was like, oh, I thought you and the other dude hooked up, but was it you and Eliza? Or no, specifically, I mean, it doesn't matter in the end, because if you're one, like I said, you're with one, you're with all of them. I love that, like, she starts making out with Eliza, and like all of them kind of like, oh, one of them literally crashes their car because they were like, whoa, kind of got caught up in the moment. I think it's probably like maybe it's a heightened sensation across for all of them. Maybe it's because they share it as one consciousness, like the ripple across to the others is just like, whoo. I get, for a lack of a better word, maybe orgasmic. I don't know. It was very fascinating to kind of see that. I'm like, oh, because everyone else had to stop it. Like, whoa, like, holy shit, Maybe it's not just, on a physical level, but also like on an emotional level, it's heightened for them, But nevertheless, I just thought that was kind of fascinating. We had them interrogate one of the captured dudes. It's the dude who woke up last episode. Totally not Marcus. I was wondering if that was, but I was completely wrong about that. The dude's name is Peter. Turns out he works for the little god. So that's interesting. And also, obviously, Conrad kind of like pumping him for information. It's interesting seeing him kind of use his ability, and just at first the dude's just kind of like he's kind of trying to cough up a loogie, almost like, I mean, essentially, you know, it's almost like, it sounds like he's, you know, his lungs are filling up with blood or something morbid like that. But then it's like later on he's all loopy and stuff, answering questions. It's kind of interesting, kind of breaking down a lot of stuff. Like, for one, the whole, this wasn't even Lorik's idea. It was more so he kind of went about it because he's like, oh, I know the Carpe Diem. Essentially, I know when the time is to strike. I know that to kind of be on my own. Like, I didn't need Lorik's orders. I knew when to strike. It also seems like they were kind of told not to go after Mythony because she wasn't really worth it. Like, she was broken in, because the whole thing is kind of like EVA's, the state versus us type of situation, because it's like, essentially, your dogs are the military. Your dogs are the government. Like, the fact of the matter is, you're slaves to the state, is what Peter was kind of saying to Conrad. Because it's like, who are you really? He's like, the fact of the matter is, they broke you down. And the fact of the matter is, you know, it kind of calling him out for being a hypocrite. Because it's like, oh, you're talking about we're human traffickers. Are you really any different? The fact of the matter is what you do to EVAs. Because like we saw, like I said, what we saw with the Gestalt. They were young kids being put through the ringer to basically bring out their abilities, kind of forge them into weapons. And, you know, it's like, I guess it's like, yeah, we sell them off, but are you any different? You kidnap children and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, I love how you acted on high and mighty. You're calling out for their hypocrisy. Doesn't still take away from the fact that you're a piece of shit, but whatever. But you can see it kind of bothering Conrad. And I think all of that seems like it might be alluding to what who Conrad is as a person. That the fact of the matter is, he doesn't want to be just second fiddle. The fact of the matter is, you know, he's looking to rise. He wants to be more. I think he wants, like, it's probably making him kind of second guess his position, to be like, I thought I was here a part of the Sheke as someone powerful, but I'm just, you know, he kind of answers to someone else. Because it almost, like, him and Linda had the whole conversation of, like, we kind of have to be united front. But then it kind of comes down to it, like, Peter leaving. He's like, oh, so this is your boss. Hi, boss. And it's kind of like undermining his position and stuff like that. Even Linda going above his head, and he'd be like, I'll go along with the vetting process. And she's like, good to know that about the whole, like, him and the home secretary. Or at least I believe that's what the conversation was about. It was like, look at her. She's so, the camera loves her, doesn't it? And just, you know, you can tell, like, Linda is annoying him. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front. But it was interesting, too, when Mythony ended up confronting him, too, because it's like, essentially, it's like, once again, the whole point of stealing her was to sell her, and the purpose is like, hey, well, for one, he's kind of an asshole because he's taunting her. It's like, oh, how much of your memories was taken? All of it? Some of it? The fact of the so it's like, which one of them specifically took her memory? Was it one of the other dead ones at the bridge that, like, before they died, they ended up snatching her memory? I guess that's the whole point. Maybe by taking her memory, they were planning on making her more, I don't know. It's really hard to say, like, whether or not it was supposed to make her more applicable. No, that's not the right word. Maybe it is, to what they would want her to be to whoever they're selling her to. It's like making her kind of a mindless tool that they can use and mold her into whatever they want to. Maybe that's a potential. But you also have, like, Peter being like, yeah, this is all because of that person. It's like, who? It's like, oh, all of them. Like, basically, they broke you down all those years ago and turned you into what you are now, essentially. You know, so it was interesting. There's, like, the whole Glen Grove and Bristol thing, which Bristol kind of got thrown in her face last episode by the Gestalt. So it's like, I'm assuming Glen Grove, because even he was like, the Gestalt were like, no, yeah, that place, yeah, it had terrible memories for us all, too. We weren't in our own mind back then, but hey, that's in the past. I'm assuming Glen Grove was the place we saw in the video with the Gestalt when they were younger. I'm assuming that's the place where the government trained their EVAs to kind of turn them into what they are. She goes there, interestingly enough, after looking up her file, but everything about her was redacted. So even if she, and that's once again the sad aspect to it, because her memory, once again, I was under the impression her memory would never come back, but everything else seems like maybe it's a whole thing of like, like I say, she got examined and everything, so it seemed like her memory might come back eventually, which it'd be interesting. But currently, it's like you have no way to ever know who you were exactly because everything about you. Because maybe it's just I'm assuming maybe it's like that for everyone in the Shige. It's like their files are redacted. But it all ties to Glen Grove, and she finds more ionized like sand and dirt. So it's like, okay, so my powers went off here. So there's kind of nothing there. There's a whole like memorial trust thing, and it's like, okay, so did she kind of blow the place up the last time? Because it's so interesting. Because I guess they always knew what she was capable of, and it's just come out in spurts. I guess maybe like Glen Grove, maybe even Bristol, and the bridge were 3 instances of her power kind of reaching what it's fully capable of. I even love Miffy throwing that in Peter's face because he's like, oh, the fact that you ran like a little scared little girl, but it's like, yeah, but you gunned for me 3 times and you failed. You're the one that's chained here, and obviously you know what I'm capable of because I messed you up on the bridge, which that kind of pissed him off a little bit. Also, side note, it turns out I was kind of right about what his ability is. I thought it was kind of fascinating. I figured as much with just his symptoms of like, you must be able to kind of slow your body down to basically make it seem like you're dead when you're not, but nevertheless. I'm very curious to find out what that whole Glen Grove situation is potentially with Bristol. Whether or not that's what it was basically alluding to, and part of me was kind of hoping that on some point, like she kind of lose control, her powers activate, and she kind of messed Peter up. But it's like that caused more problems than necessary. She is taking her pills though. It's meant to kind of keep her anxiety in check. But I do believe like without her pills, because once again, it's like, because she has that anxiety, like if she doesn't get it under control, like her powers will kind of go a little haywire. So that's why I think Miffy like took the pills to kind of keep herself contained and in control. So there's all of that. Then there's the whole Monica situation because obviously she's trying to fill the role of a middleman for Marcus. Interesting enough, I love that whole scene with her and Ingrid because to me it shows that Monica doesn't have any tact because she's all like, oh, do this for me, do that. It's like, oh yeah, like 50,000, is it pounds? What was it? Quid, bits, whatever you call it. It's like, Ingrid's like, why don't you get your American assistant to help? Well, I would, but my assistant's in America, so they're probably sleeping right now because they're in America, just the time difference and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just like, under these circumstances, she's like that, just kind of like, oh, I'm trying to do my job and everything. Or maybe it is just she just doesn't have any tact. I assume it's just that. But interesting enough, it's like, oh, here's Ingrid and her brother, who her brother was killed in a vulture raid, and obviously, Ingrid's sympathetic too because it's like, I lost someone, but you also lost someone too because of losing Marcus. So she ended up helping her out, set up the whole like fake identity and stuff. She did kind of make reference later on to someone with enhanced perception abilities, like being able to see for miles and hear a whisper amongst a crowd. I'm assuming she was referencing Marcus, I'd assume. So that's kind of a keynote in his ability. But nevertheless, she ends up kind of taking part in the auction and ends up selling it off to this dude named Gordon, kind of trying to understand his whole thing. Obviously, he sells off some EVAs as kind of like a loan, while others he keeps almost for like his own personal collection. For what exactly, we don't know. But we do see that Monica is kind of tailing him and tailing the product and everything, kind of understanding where everything is kind of taken to kind of figure this whole situation out. So that's interesting on that front as well. Also, kind of speaking of the Gestalt, I kind of let this drop earlier, but because I forgot to kind of talk about it too, is like, I like that they kept her, like, the coat she was wearing when she was, like, on the run, and then, like, as each one passed, they grabbed it, kind of touching it a little bit, kind of getting all sentimental about it and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of cute. Once again, it's interesting to see how the Gestalt operate. Oh, and I also love the fake story that's being created, the narrative of basically it being like some essentially cult is the reason why there was like all that, those deaths on the bridge and stuff like that, trying to make it seem like Peter is the head of the cult and everything. It's kind of interesting because you actually get to see the behind the scenes of them, the government creating these fake narratives, these fake stories. And it's so interesting because I also got introduced to Danielle Wolf. It seems like she's the one mainly constructing the false narrative. It seems like Claudia was on it first, but then that kind of brought into big guns with Danielle potentially doing that. I'm assuming that's what that kind of all alluded to. It definitely seems like she's the one crafting the narrative. It seems like she's also got a team kind of, flooding everything and all the people with all their conspiracies and stuff like that, with so much science and stuff like that they get so bored. They're just like, bombard them with so much boring stuff of the science and nuance to everything that you just kind of debunk everything that they're saying or whatever, trying to get people as far away from the truth as possible, because obviously there's people online, even Ingrid was like, yeah, there's conspiracy theorists who just happen to be right, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where everything goes. Like I said, even with the whole Conrad thing, I'm curious, is he going to kind of get mixed up with the Legat? Like I said, maybe for him it's kind of like, no, I don't want to be a dog of the government. I won't be someone that can kind of keep him on a leash. I want to kind of go out my own, do my own thing. Like he's so upholding to them. But to be fair, once again, it seems like that's something that they're all kind of forced to be in that position, because that's what the Shikei, just the government in general, kind of breaks down EVAs to make them into weapons to fit their needs. So we'll ultimately see how this whole situation plays out going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Nosferatu. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, obviously, the kids are calling Vic and they're even threatening her because, like, oh, Father Christmas hasn't come back yet. Obviously, Vic is saying, like, well, I'm the one that can stop him and stuff like that. But it's like, you cannot and you will not. We won't allow you. Saying that they're so hungry and stuff like that. One of the kids talking to her is Haley. It's interesting because obviously it's like, I guess it all kind of ties together because there's something later on. Well, I'm getting all around, but like obviously the Wraith makes it so that it's not that you're not seen, it's more so that you're not noticed. It's kind of like how Charlie phrases it, because the same thing happens to Vic multiple times. Her house phone rings, and later on in the bar, a payphone rings, and it's supposed to, I guess, represent the fact that, people aren't noticing it because only those, I guess, who are strong creatives can actually tune into it, I guess. Maybe that's what it's supposed to represent. Either way, turns out, yep, I was right. Vic's mom got rid of her bike and is just kind of saying this and that. It's just like, oh, you shouldn't have had it because you were driving it illegally. You've had it since you were so young and stuff. Basically, the moment she kept referring to it as like a death trap or something like that and talking about it might be associated with everything that's wrong with Vic right now. Like her mom is trying to be a mom and trying to take care of her and everything, which Vic obviously doesn't appreciate. She calls her dad and is like, let's go to Bike Fest or whatever. It's like, she only wants to go there because it's mainly meant to be a situation of like, I want to get a new bike. I need to get a new knife, because she talks to Maggie. It's like, yo, use your Scrabbles. Let me find where my bike is. But it's like, well, I can't because I threw my Scrabbles out. It's like, wait, what? So now Vic's kind of caught in that position of just like, what am I supposed to do? So, she knows she can get another knife because of Jolene. So it's like, okay, so now I just got to go find another one. Obviously, like her dad is like, oh, she's just like, oh, you didn't come visit me while I was in the hospital. He's like, yeah, I was working. And she's like, she's frustrated by it, but she's like, okay, whatever, let's go to Bike Fest. Yeah, she wants to make it seem like it's a father-daughter thing like it always is, but this time it's like, she obviously like a more important reason, and that's because she needs her bike, because it's the only way she's going to be able to fight Charlie. And, sadly, Maggie's just still not up for it, because for Maggie, it's like, she always felt safe. Even on her own, she always felt like she was good enough that she could protect herself and look after herself, so she never had to feel worried about it. But now that comfort of like, oh, I can handle myself, is taken away. She's scared. Like that what she felt was kind of a safety net of just like, I can take care of myself, is gone now. And so we'll get into Maggie's situation in a little bit, but Vic ends up spending time with Drew, and it's so interesting because obviously Drew says some very harsh stuff about her dad, but it's coming from a good place. But at the same time, like, Vic is the way she is. She's always in the defense of her dad, and that's the sad thing is, I think that speaks volumes that you have to constantly defend your dad, whether it be from your mom, whether it be from the dude, your therapist while you're in the hospital, or even this dude that you potentially like and stuff like that. But like for Drew, it's kind of like, it's not, you don't owe him anything. He abandoned you. Fact of the matter is, he didn't even come see you in the hospital. My parents, yeah, they might have sent me off to boarding school and stuff like that, but that's just because they want the best for me. They care for me. The fact of the matter is, like, kind of what has he done for you? And then, you have, Vic kind of getting on offensive, being like, the fact of the matter is, it's hard enough being, having seen 2 tours in the Gulf. The fact of the matter is getting married as a teen and being a parent as a teen. And the fact of the matter is, like, always struggling to keep up with the bills and stuff like that. It's fine and dandy for you to have your opinion because your family was kind of started after they were well off, after they were well educated, after they had good enough amount of money. So it's like, you don't have room to talk, but it's also Drew drops in like the last thing that kind of like pushes it over the edge when he calls, or calling him a drunk, essentially, that he drinks. Yeah, that's all. And that pissed Vic off because that's always something that kind of gets thrown in her face. And she goes off with her dad, and he says this kind of thing of like, oh, when you found, Big Red, her bike, it's like, yeah, you lit up like Christmas lights and stuff like that. And you can tell Vic is immediately testing out the bikes. Even that one day, he was like, oh, it's better than your old bike. She starts revving it up. She doesn't even have to use it to try and use her bridge. It's just not going to work because she doesn't feel it. It's interesting, too, because, like, she can kind of, like, halfway push herself there without her bike, but obviously she needs her bike to kind of punch through because it's, like, the symptoms of her power, like, the voices in her head kind of start activating, but the bridge itself won't pop up without her knife, so she goes off with her dad at a bar. They run into Craig. That's a whole interesting thing because obviously you see Vic sitting there. She's so annoyed. She's looking at her dad drinking 2 beers and everything, and it just eventually she comes back. She knocks back a beer, and then she goes all in on him because it's like all this stuff about him apologizing, him being like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I haven't been the best dad of the year. Fact of the matter is, I didn't really do too much when your mom sold your bike." But he's like, "I'm so proud of you," and she's just like. She's just tired of it. The fact is, it's like, you're not that great of a father because you didn't come visit me. You abandoned me. And the fact of the matter is, like, he's like, oh, like, do you feel like drinking here makes you feel more like an adult or something? So it's like, yeah, you can judge my actions because you're all adult. She's like, I'm not supposed to be the adult in this situation. The fact is that you're kind of, like, acting like this shows that you're not much of an adult in this situation. But it's like, I'm the kid in this situation. And because Vic even goes to the point of talking about the fact that it's, oh, Big Red, you said like, oh, I lit up Christmas lights. It's like, no, she even calls him out. It's like, that's bullshit. You got me that as an apology gift because I heard you and Mom yelling. Yes, I heard you. You didn't think I did, but I'm not stupid. We lived in a box. We all try to pretend like we didn't know. Because even Vic even admits it. It's like, for her, it's like such a long time. She kind of ignored the signs, but they were there and firm. She just didn't want to see it. Because once again, she always wanted to see the best in her dad, but now, like, I think Drew putting everything in perspective, just after everything, plus Drew, plus all of this, it just kind of sat, and it's just like, no. Because notice, too, he decided to come only with her. He was supposed to go with Tiffany, but I guess Tiffany didn't want to be around Vic right now, so he's just trying to make excuses, because now he's torn between, like, oh, the new life he's trying to start, but he's got this nagging little thing that kind of holds him back from starting his life over completely, and that's Vic. And she just goes off on him, rightfully so. And he's like, the fact of the matter is, I hope you don't end up becoming a disappointment to the people you care about. But he's like, if you keep drinking like your old man, you will, And it does seem like that whole thing did have an impact, because later on when he got back, he threw away all the alcohol. It wasn't just the cans. Like, some of them were probably empty. There's a full bottle, or there's a half a bottle of alcohol. Threw it in the trash. I think what she said hit a nerve, and it made him go, I think this will be the thing that kind of pushes him to kind of stop, because it's like, because his wife is one thing, which, that's a mess of a complicated situation, but I think Vic being pissed at him, maybe even hating him, I don't think he can handle that, and I think it's making him go like, I can't be this person. Now, what that means for him and Tiffany, I don't know what it means for their family. That's a very messed up, complicated family, because for Vic, it's like, my dad's a drunk, my mom sold my bike, I can't access my bridge, I can't save Haley, I can't save anyone, but the only person she has to rely on now is Craig, because she can't even rely on Maggie with this whole situation, because Maggie's kind of in the dump about the whole situation as well. She's kind of given up, just because it's too much. And Craig's there to kind of be her helping hand, he even gets her that pin and everything, so he's the only person she can turn to, because with all of this, it's like, I don't care about your bridge, I don't care about Haley, I don't care about your dad, I don't care about none of that, I only care about you. How are you, And for her, I guess for her, it feels like he's the only one that sees everything. It's like, you're the only one that sees me, everyone else is trying to play the role of being a parent and just not, I feel like Vic might feel like no one's listening, no one's really, really asking her. Like, everyone just kind of going the motions of like, I'm playing this role of being the mom, but you're not really seeing or understanding, like, what's going on. Craig understands and knows everything about her bridge and the bite, but he's still pushing forward about worry about her. So I think that kind of plays a role in that whole situation. I'm curious, like, whether that's going to be something more or not, because obviously there's a whole Drew situation, but it's like, well, Drew kind of told it like it is, but Craig's the only one that knows kind of everything. So I'm curious, like, is Craig just going to be the friend, or is there going to be more? Vic even tried to talk to Bing about everything, but he didn't want to believe her. Granted, it was enough to kind of seep in his head that he's like, oh, the previous people that worked for Charlie ended up dead. I mean, the question then becomes like, well, the fact of the matter is they did the exact same thing you're doing and they just happen to be dead. I mean, it's more so because the last dude, Peter, is like, oh, he got rid of him because he became an inconvenience because of the way he handled things. There was so much evidence left behind. That was the issue. And every time he kills his partners, they get left with being the ones held responsible for all the kidnappings and stuff. And, Vic is like, oh, I don't want you could end up that way, Bing. And Bing actually asked Charlie, but Charlie's like, oh, why would you even get an idea like that? Oh, Vic trying to get inside of your mind and blah, 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 blah. They go to Colorado and end up running into the lady whose son and grandson were taken by Charlie. She recognizes the Wraith immediately and him as an old man. It's like, oh, I know what this is all about. She calls Joe, which just kind of ties into the old Maggie situation. The moment Joe was like, checking up on her and everything, I'm like, he's like, yeah, because things are kind of private, I don't want you to slip back in bad habits. She popped pills, or not necessarily popping pills, but she got mixed up in drugs back then, didn't she? And it's like, maybe all of this kind of, like, maybe her Scrabble and everything kind of gave her new purpose, and that became her everything, and that became, like, the thing she could focus on doing good or whatever, and whatever the case may be, maybe it's a combination of Joe, maybe it's a combination of the Scrabble, which is interesting about her Scrabble. Now that she threw it away, her stutter went away, which is interesting. I guess, like, once, because even Vic, it doesn't seem like she gets the headaches as much. She got them even without her bike, but I guess, like, because she got the visions of a fire and, like, Haley, but I think that was more so just because being a strong creative, it didn't necessarily have to be tied to her bite, but obviously she's not getting an eye situation or the mat, like a whole bunch of headaches. Like I said, she got him a little bit when she was trying to access a bridge, but that was about it. So without your respective knife or whatever, and even in Maggie's case, her pseudo knife, because obviously she's a little different because she's a medium, but without her Scrabble, it's like the cost of it doesn't, well, why would you have to pay the price when you're not using your powers at all? So I'm wondering, is it all for the Scrabbles? Could she get new Scrabbles, or would they magically find their way back to her once things have kind of changed? I don't know. But you see Joe ends up finding her kind of on the bench. She's high just from all the pills she's popping. Because I knew something was up, because I was like, she hid the, I was like, you're taking stuff for it, but you're not saying anything. But then she admits, she's like, I was trying to get, a refill, but they wouldn't. So it's like, I guess Joe kind of felt good, because it's like, okay, at least you're not hiding it from me. You're trying to be up front. But then I guess it's like no, she secretly had more pills. She just wasn't telling him, like, what was up, because she was trying to make it seem like that way she wasn't 100% lying. She was kind of being truthful to a certain extent. So I guess that's how that whole situation worked. But that was how she was dealing with everything. Sadly, for her, it's like Joe took her back to his place and was like, the fact is, I know you've been through a lot. I know it's tough, but hey, I'm here for you. You're going to stay here till you get better. But when she comes out, I'm like, Joe's gone, isn't he? Because Charlie ended up getting Joe's card off the lady. And it's like, yeah, ends up taking him to Christmas Land, where all the kids, the whole scissors with the drifter, and all of them pull out scissors, and I figured the moment I was like, Joe got kidnapped, I was like, he's food for the kids because they're all hungry. I'm like, yeah. And then they proceed to all take out scissors and stab him multiple times. All of them do. And then you see them basically devouring him. So it's not just like a vampire thing of like, oh, I'm gonna drink your blood. It's like, no, I'm gonna eat your flesh. So it's borderlining. They're a cross between vampires and zombies, interestingly enough. And it's just, like, sad that happens, because it's already bad enough that she lost Daniel, but now it's like, now she's lost Joe, too, who's probably the closest thing she's had to family, And she's probably going to blame herself, too, on multiple levels, because it's like, I'm the one that got him involved in this case. I pointed him in this direction. Plus, I wasn't there. If I had not thrown away my Scrabbles, like, maybe we could have taken down Charlie before it got to this point. So she's probably going to blame herself for all of that. A lot of guilt and shit both Maggie and Vic are dealing with right now. There's a whole conversation with Bing about how, like, he's like, oh, can I get into Christmas line? You promised I could. It's like, no, once we've rescued the 10 children, then you can get into Christmas line. It's like, no, he's just using, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who didn't mess up like Peter did, but the moment you become more of a hassle for him, he plans on getting, I mean, especially because, I mean, granted, the cops aren't necessarily looking at him like that, but Bing is in a position where it's like they're at least questioning him. So when it's all said and done, I'm sure Charlie's going to kill him, because it's like, you're not necessary, because you can't go into Christmas Land, because Christmas Land isn't for people like you. Can once again, it's like, oh, naughty boys don't get to go into Christmas Land. Is what Bing was saying. It's like, well, naughty boys include people who kill people, but I guess for him, it's like, well, I'm doing it's for the greater good. I'm saving these kids anyway, you know. So that poor lady whose son and grandson was taken by Charlie, I'm assuming that she was, I mean, it seemed like she was kind of dying from a heart attack, just because she saw the shock of seeing, like, oh my God, that's what, you know, seeing Charlie go from an old man to a young man in front of her. He was literally on death's door, but, you know, the Wraith getting fixed kind of brought him back. It keeps him pumping full of life. So what's also interesting is the moment that little girl was like, I'm Millie Minx, your new best friend, Millie Minx or something, I was like, wait, are you his daughter? It's like, it's like, oh, father and everything in the end. So the question is that legitimately his daughter? There's the whole black hair situation. Or is it just a situation where she was like the first child he ever took, and it's like, oh, I'm going to make you mine specifically? Or are they all technically his children? Because he is Father Christmas, so that begs the question. But I kind of get the feeling like that might be his actual kid, either because she was the first one he took, or that could just be legitimately his kid, which could be legitimately his kid he just first took. It depends. I mean, it makes you wonder. I doubt that's Jolene's kid. I don't think that, but maybe it was like who he was with before Jolene or whatever. I don't know. It depends on that whole Charlie situation. We got little insight to it with the whole Jolene situation, but even before that, like when he first kidnapped kids. So I'm assuming it's just more of a, she was the first. I don't think that might be his biological kid, but we'll see how that all ends up playing out, you know, ultimately. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where this all goes for us. Obviously, where Maggie goes with this whole Joe situation, you know, because there ain't no saving him. And the whole question is, like, because even Jolie was like, you can't save those kids. Like, are they too far gone to be saved? Like, is there any way to reverse what's been done? Killing Charlie and destroying the Wraith, will that save them, or are they too far gone? What about Vic? Is she going to find a new knife? Like, I mean, she's assuming, I mean, you'd assume it'd be in the form of a bite, but obviously, like, your knife can take on any form, because Jolene's were originally her skate, her rollerblades, but now it was her wheelchair, so maybe Vic's will be something different. But I'm assuming just because her knife can stay the same, you know, because obviously it seems like your knife kind of adapts to you, so it's like her bike is still applicable to her, so like her next knife will be a bike too. I'm just curious to see what circumstances are going to make something her knife. I'm wondering, is that pen going to help at all? Just the fact is, they made kind of a point of it. Maybe part of me thought like maybe she'll put it on her helmet, and it makes it so whatever bike she ends up picking will automatically become her knife. All she has to do is just find it in herself to believe, because that's something that's kind of happening with Maggie too. It's like, you know, like Joe was like, I left on a note, I believe in you, because Maggie kind of stopped believing in herself, you know. So I'm very curious to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward. I should also mention our first look at Christmas Land. Very interesting place. It looks like essentially an amusement park, but it makes sense. It's supposed to be kind of a land where children could be children and kind of enjoy themselves and have so much fun and kind of get caught up in everything. So it's like, okay, it makes sense for it to look exactly like it does. Like I said, it kind of reminds me of Christmas Town from, like I said, I don't remember as much from the original movie of Nightmare on Elm Street, but once again, because I make reference to it so many damn times lately, I think I've literally said Kingdom Hearts so many times in these past recordings. I don't think maybe associated with this, but I feel like there's something else I talked about Kingdom Hearts about too. Regardless, it kind of feels more kind of closely tied to like Christmas Town and Kingdom Hearts 2. But once again, I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've seen Nightmare Before Christmas, so I'm sure aesthetically it's the same way in the movie, like I said. But nevertheless, like I said, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where everything ends up taking us going forward. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.